Thank you. Guys, I am so excited to be here. But there's something that I need to say to kind of clear the air. Josh, during his game, as Clint pointed out to us, was calling them, what was he calling them? Hot Pockets. They're pizza rolls. But then he also said pizza bagels. And they're called bagel bites. And I'm not here to point fingers, but Josh is wrong. And so I just needed to put that out there. He's not here to defend himself. And so, yeah, next time you see him, just tell him that he's wrong. And he won't know what we're talking about, but he'll accept it because he knows it's the truth. Guys, I'm excited to be here tonight. My message is titled, Pace Yourself. How about you look to your neighbor and tell them, pace yourself. Thank you. Let's get straight to it. So I want to read you guys a few verses. So if you guys want, you can open your Bibles to Hebrews 12. Verse 1, I'm going to go ahead and read it. Y'all, take your time getting there. I'm going to read it. It's going to be up on the screen. But it says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you so much that we are able to come into your presence tonight. We're able to worship you. God, I pray tonight that you would just open our hearts to the word that you want to speak to us. God, that it would not be my words spoken, but it would be your words spoken through me. Jesus, we love you so much, and we thank you for loving us. It's in your name we pray. Amen. All right, guys, I know some of y'all, but let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I used to live here, and that's how I know a few of you, a lot of you upperclassmen. I knew y'all when you were in middle school, but a lot of y'all are new faces to me, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. Hey, thanks for waving back at me. That was very kind. So I moved to Gainesville in 2014. I came here for school, and I was really excited. I had known about Westside because my grandparents were members here. My mom grew up in Gainesville, and my grandparents were members here at Westside. And so I'd come before and visited with them. So I was excited to come and get connected, get plugged in. And honestly, I kind of had set a goal for myself. At my church back where I was living before I moved here, I actually was a student intern. And so I knew that I wanted to do student ministry. So I made a goal for myself that I moved here in January, and that by summer that I would be an intern again, a student intern. And so I moved here with this goal in mind. And I got connected but I got connected in college ministry because that's the age that I was. And I don't know if you guys know this, but when someone comes to church for the first time or is going to a new church, and they want to volunteer, they don't automatically throw them in with the minors. You kind of have to earn some credibility to come work with the youth, to work with the children. And so I came and was serving in college department and was getting connected in, making a lot of friends. I really loved it. And about a few months in, about May, summertime, our college pastor came to me and asked if I wanted to intern. And that had been my goal, but I really wanted to be a youth intern. But I was like, okay, maybe God wants to teach me something. Maybe there's more to learn than just student ministry. I need to, broaden my horizons, look outside my bubble. So I was like, all right, I'll be a college intern. So I interned for college and quickly realized that was not my gifting. It was really great, and I learned a lot about ministry. I learned what to do, what not to do, made some really great friendships with people that I'm still really great friends with now, and so I'm thankful for that time, but knew that that was not my passion, that was not my calling, that was not what I was gifted in. And so I quit my college internship and went right next door to Asa's office because he was right there, and I said, I want to work with the youth. And he said, okay, you have to, be patient. This is a process. And he had already had interns at that time, and his interns were Zach and Clint. So they were just my neighboring interns. I was a college intern. They were youth interns. And he said, you can't just jump in the middle of it, but we would love to have you as a youth leader. So I said, yes, sign me up. That's what I want to do. I'll do whatever you need as a youth leader, because that's just where I wanted to be and what I knew I wanted to do. And so I served as a youth leader for 2 years, the rest of the years that I was here, and I loved it so much. I helped on Wednesday night. I led a team, and I co-led a girls' Bible study that a few of you guys came to, but that was a while ago, and so not all of you were here then. But I did a girls' Bible study, D-Now, whatever they would let me do is what I wanted to be a part of. And so I did that, and then it was fall of 2016, and my family had moved to Georgia when I was living here. And I was driving down the road to go visit my family, and I looked over, saw the sunset, or maybe it was the moon. I can't really remember, but it was something in the sky. God always speaks to me through the sky. And I was driving, and I heard God say, "This is your home." And I was like, no, this is South Georgia. I'm not moving to Georgia. I live in Florida. I'm a Florida girl. That's where I want to be. And I don't recommend arguing with God. It doesn't ever turn out in your favor. But I have done it a few times, and it has never worked out in my favor. But God said, no, this is where I want you to be. I want you to go to Georgia for a few years. Well, he didn't say a few years. He just said go to Georgia. But I didn't know that it would only be a few years. And so God told me to move to Georgia, and I was so reluctant. I did not want that to be the case. But if there's anything I'm scared of in life, it's disobeying God. I always want to be walking in his plan. And so I said, okay, I'll move to Georgia. And so I moved to Georgia and worked there for a few years. And it was different from what I thought it was going to be, but I learned a lot, and I grew a lot in that time. And you see, it's easy to kind of compare our journey with other people and get caught up in, well, what if I had been doing this? If I had had my way, I would have stayed in Florida. I would have stayed here, and who knows what I would have done. I would have found something to do, but I would have stayed here. But that's not the path that God had for me. He had me moving to Georgia, and while I was there, I learned so much. I grew a lot as a person. I grew a lot in ministry. I grew a lot as a leader, a sister, a friend. And a lot happened with my family in that time. We had a lot of family stuff going on. My mom had a heart attack, and she was actually in the hospital for a month. And I know that I would have wanted to be there with my family. And if I'd been in Florida, it would have been really hard for me just to quit my job or leave my job for a month. And so that turned out to be a really big blessing that I was able to be with my family during that time. And I knew that it was just that God was using it as a season, as a gift. And my first point tonight is that God sets our pace. It's so easy for us to want to set our own pace. Like I said, I oftentimes like to argue with God when he tries to tell me what to do. I don't like to be told what to do. And so I am reluctant sometimes to the things that he tells me. But God sets our pace, and he knows what he has in front of us. And we can't argue with God because, like I said, ultimately he has the last word. And I want to go back to that verse that I read a minute ago in Hebrews 12. The last part of verse 1 says, "And let us run the race with perseverance, the race marked out for us." And I think it clearly says the race marked out for us. It doesn't say run aimlessly until you get somewhere. It says marked out for us because God knows our path before we do. God knows our path, and God knows our pace. And he determines that, and we can't say anything or do anything otherwise. We can't change his mind. We can try to run from it, but ultimately he always brings us back to where he wants us. And you have to trust God with your pace. He has set this before you. He knows what you can handle. He knows what you can't handle. And he has this pace perfectly planned for you. And you have to just accept it and learn. I think as we grow older, life gets easier when we learn to accept what God has for us and not to push back on that, not to push the boundaries. But life just gets easier when we learn to listen to the voice of the Lord. And oftentimes, God sets this pace for us, and we have to learn our pace through conditioning. I don't know, I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with conditioning. Have y'all ever had to go through conditioning for maybe a sport or something at school? Cool, 2 people have gone through conditioning. Okay, there's a little bit more. So conditioning can oftentimes, it is hard, and it stretches us. It pushes us past what we think we're capable of. And it's a heavy load sometimes that we have to carry, and it trains us. Let me read you the definition of conditioning. So it says, the process of training or accustoming a person or animal to behave in a certain way or to accept certain circumstances or environments. And this leads me to my second point, which is don't compare your pace. I want to tell you a story. And my brother and I had been planning this trip. We'd wanted to go on this trip for a really long time. We wanted to fly into Canada, and then we were going to go look at some different national parks. And we'd been planning it for years. We wanted to take it this year, and obviously things changed, and we weren't able to do it how we wanted to. But something worked out, and we were actually able to go about 2 months ago, right before I moved here. Some freedom, like his work opened up some time, and so he was able to go. And so we ended up planning this trip in 1 week to drive from Georgia up to Montana, down through Wyoming, and then back to Georgia. I don't know if I would recommend it to you. It was a lot of fun, but maybe if you guys want to go to some of those places, I would recommend flying. It was a long time in the car, but it was a lot of fun. And while my brother and I, in the week that we were planning this trip, we were looking at some hikes that we wanted to go on. And so we were looking at this one hike, and it's called Avalanche Lake. It's in Glacier National Park in Montana. And so we're looking at this hike, and it's about like a 4.5, 5-mile round-trip hike. So we're like, okay, that seems pretty good. We can do that. Well, so my brother was like, Kendall, I just want you to know it's a different elevation. Like, you need to be used to the fact that the elevation is going to be different, so your lungs are going to handle because it's a different oxygen level. And I was like, come on. I'm young, I'm fit, I work out, I hike even. In Georgia, there's a mountain not far from my parents' house that I would go hike often. And so I was like, it's fine. Elevation change, fine. I'll be good. And so we go on our road trip, we get to this hike, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, how can I prepare for this? We're going out, we're getting ready to go on this hike, and I'm like, all right, short, or steady, slow and steady. That wins the race. It worked for the turtle. Surely it'll work for me. So we set out on this hike, and my brother was very gracious with me. I think my pace was a little bit slower than what he wanted to do. He is 6 foot, and I'm 5'3", and so his strides are a lot bigger than mine. And so he was very patient with me and went slower. But it actually worked out for him because he could walk ahead, and then he would just stand there and wait for me to catch up. So he got a breather, but I never did because I'm just, hustling up the mountain, tripping left and right because I'm very clumsy. And so anyway, we're going up, and I'm like, okay, slow and steady, this will be fine. So we're going, and a first pair of people pass me. I'm like, okay, but it's all right. These people are like legit hikers. They have the sticks, like the poles, not the ones made out of wood, like they're real rods or something. I don't really know. They pull them out of their backpack, they whip it up, and it's a real hiking stick. They also have the backpacks that have the water bottles. That's how you know that they're real hikers. And so I was like, okay, these people are clearly professionals. It's okay if they pass me, it's fine. And so we keep going, and then my brother, motions for me, scoot over, someone else needs to pass. So I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So then I scoot over a little bit, and this time, it's an older couple. They're probably about maybe in their 60s. And so I was like, okay, that's not old, but it's not young. I'm in my 20s. So I was like, okay, I've got 40 years on me, and they're passing me on this mountain. So I was like, all right, it's okay, just keep going, you're going to be fine. I'm breathing heavy, but that's normal. It's a hike, you're putting out some effort, some energy, so I was like, oh, it's okay. And then another couple passed me, and this time it's a young couple, and they're clearly in love, and they're just going on a hike like they're walking around a park. They're just holding hands, staring at each other, walking, just talking, and I'm like, no, this is too far. I'm upset. I'm still upset. If you can't tell, this is still a very heated memory for me. But I'm like, okay, they have passed me, And they're just staring at each other, which one was making me upset because I'm tripping, and I'm clearly watching where I'm going, but I'm still slipping on the rocks, still tripping over everything. And they're just walking, looking at each other lovingly into each other's eyes, like they're just walking around a lake. And then I get more upset because I'm like, they have no care in the world, and they're not even out of breath. And I'm like huffing and puffing up this mountain, and they're beating me, and they're not even trying, and I am losing, is how I viewed it. I was like, I'm just losing. They're going faster than me, and all these people are passing me, and it really took a toll on my pride. And so as I'm hiking, just getting upset, so then I'm probably working myself up, so then I'm huffing and puffing even more, and God just spoke to me, and he said, Kendall, don't compare your pace to theirs. They live at this elevation. Their lungs are used to breathing in this oxygen. You've only been here for 3 days, something that they've been living in their entire life, that they've been preparing for their entire life, and you're expecting just to catch up to where they are in 3 days. It's a little bit unrealistic. And so God just kept speaking to me like, do not compare yourself to them. You don't know what they've been through. You don't know how they've been preparing themselves for this. Maybe they've been prepping and practicing and hiking their treadmill. Have you ever seen the people who are on the treadmill like holding on because they're about to fall off because they're going at such an elevated pace? Like, that's intense. I did not prep that way. But God just kept speaking to me saying, don't compare your pace to theirs. You don't know what they've walked through. You don't know what they've done to get to where they are, how they've conditioned for this hike. And I was walking, and I was like, oh, man, that really convicted me in that moment, because I was trying to compare myself to the pace that they were walking at. But God was telling me, don't do that. And I want you to get this, that we cannot look at other people around us. We can't get upset when they're passing us. We don't know what they've walked through. They don't know what we've walked through. I'm sure if they had come to Florida and we were going on, there's not really hikes around here, but if we were walking flat on a trail, they probably would have, I tell myself this to make me feel better, but then I'm sure they would be sweating and just not able to handle the heat and the humidity. Have you guys ever been somewhere else and come back to Florida and gotten off the plane and literally started coughing because the humidity is choking you? And you don't realize that because you live in it every single day. But when you're removed from it and you come back, then you realize the environment that you're in. And so maybe something that I can handle, they wouldn't be able to handle. And it's the same for our life, for our Christian walk. Things that God has placed in us, or situations that God has put in our life. Maybe we can handle it and others can't, or vice versa. Maybe they can't handle it, or we can't handle it and they can. And we can't compare the pace that that our friends are walking at, because we don't know what they've been through. We don't know how God is working in their life, what he's doing in their life. And another verse I want to read to you, another verse I want to read to you is Galatians 6, and it's from a different translation. So this is from the easy to read translation, which I had never heard of it. When I looked up this verse, it just popped up, and it said about this translation, it originally was created for people who were deaf, and I thought that was really interesting, and so I was like, okay, let me find out a little bit more. And so it was created for people who were deaf because they were having trouble understanding the English language when they were trying to read the Bible. And so they created this version just with shorter sentences and easier verbiage, just so that they could understand it better. And I think it wraps up what I'm trying to say so well. So in Galatians 6, verses 4, in the easy-to-read version, it says, don't compare yourself to others. Just look at your own work to see if you have done anything to be proud of. You must each accept the responsibilities that are yours. I think what really got me was when it says, just look at your own work and see if you have done anything to be proud of. There's things in our life that we should be proud of, but something that takes away from that is comparison. Nothing diminishes the value of something that you've done like comparison does. When we start to look and we start to place things up against something that maybe our friend has done, then it doesn't look quite as special maybe siblings. That's something that's a really big one. I think if you guys have siblings, you probably understand sibling rivalry. That is a real thing. And we're competitive with our siblings because we want our parents to look at us and see what we're doing and that we're better than them. But we're on different journeys, and we can't compare. We have different personalities. We have different giftings that we have as siblings. And so we can't compare our journey with theirs. And our parents love us no less or no more just because of something that we've done. They love us just the same, and that's the same for God. He loves us no less, no more because of the things that we've done. He loves us just the same. And Teddy Roosevelt said it so well when he said, comparison is the thief of joy. When we start to compare the things that we have that God has given us, that just robs us of the blessing that's in our life. And so we have to be careful not to do that. It's not about the outcome of maybe a test that we've taken. It's about the heart, and it's about the attitude that you have going into it, how you've tried for it. Two people could go for the same test, and one could get an A, and one could get a C, and it's equally as valuable if they both spent as much time as they could studying for it, or if they both tried their hardest. It's the same. And so there's beauty in our differences. There's beauty in our pace, and the journey is our own. And maybe you've grown up in church, and your parents have brought you to church your whole life, and you have just always showed up, and there's a time in your life where you have to take responsibility for your own walk with Christ. For me, that was when I was in middle school. I had to take responsibility for my own faith, and it wasn't my parents anymore, it was my own. Or maybe you've just started coming to Collective, and you've come with a friend, and that's amazing, and we're glad that you're here. But there comes a time when it's not your friend always bringing you. You have to take ownership for you choosing to come every single week. That's no longer your friend's responsibility or your parents' responsibility. That's your responsibility now, and that's something that you have to take ownership of your walk with Christ in your life, and you can't compare it to the people around you, to your friends. And so we have 2 points. I'm going to recap them for you. So God sets our pace. Don't compare your pace. But that brings me to point number 3, which is people are watching your pace. How many of you guys watch NASCAR? All right. Okay, 2 people. We have 2, 3 people. Great. No, but NASCAR is fun, and I know it's just cars driving around in circles, but I like it, and it's something that we grew up in my house watching. I think maybe it just has a nostalgic feel to it, and so I love NASCAR. And on Sundays after church, we would pick up fried chicken, and we'd go over to my grandparents' house. We'd all sit around, we'd eat our chicken, we'd have fun, and then we would move into the family room, and we would watch NASCAR. Now, if you guys have ever watched NASCAR, how many of you have actually watched NASCAR before? Okay, so a few of you have watched. Maybe you're not a fan, but you've watched NASCAR. Okay, so if you guys have watched a full race, at the beginning of the race, there's what's called a pace car. And so the pace car goes on, and all the cars follow in line behind it. And the pace car also, they come out the beginning of the race, and they go off when the race starts. And so then they also come back during the caution flag. Well, I thought that they were just the line leaders or something, that you just had to follow them around. I didn't really know the purpose of the pace car, but there is a purpose to the pace car. Imagine that. And so I'll tell you what it is, because I've researched it this week. So the pace car goes on to the track, and all the cars fall in line behind it. Now, the stock cars, the race cars, don't have speedometers, so they can't tell what speed they're going. They just have to assume, and they don't really need to know what speed they're going because they're just trying to go fast and beat everyone else. And so the race cars, they get behind the pace car, and different tracks have different speeds for their pit road. And so, for instance, Daytona 500, the pit road speed is 55 miles an hour. So the pace car gets on the track and sets itself to 55 miles an hour and then turns on their lights. Now, all of the stock cars line up behind them, And then they can follow along, and then they can check down and see how many RPMs they're using to follow at 55 miles an hour. That way, when they go into pit road, when they have to get their tire changed or get more gas, they go to pit road and they can slow down, check their RPMs, and match that so that they don't get dinged for speeding, because you can get points reduced, or I don't know if it's points, maybe a second, I don't really know. Didn't look that far into it. But I know that they get dinged for speeding. And so they have to go back down to the speed for that set, and it's different for different tracks. And so there's purpose to their pace, just like there's purpose to the pace in your life. Your friends are watching you, just like those stock cars are lining up behind the pace car. Your friends are watching you, especially if they know that you're a Christian. They're seeing how you respond to situations. Maybe there's a teacher that you don't like, or maybe it's a teacher that's kind of nerdy and no one really likes that teacher. They're looking at you to see how you respond, how you react to that teacher. Maybe there's a friend that you guys always make fun of, and you keep throwing them under the bus, but your friends are watching you, whether you know it or not, especially if they know that you're a Christian. We actually have a responsibility, and I'm going to read that to you over here in Philippians. So in Philippians 3, verse 17, it says, actually, I lied. It's Philippians 1, verse 27. It says, "Whatever happens, conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ." Guys, we are representing the gospel of Christ. That's a big deal. People are looking at us, seeing how we respond and react to the things around us. People want to know how we react to our surroundings. And if we are a Christian, and if our friends, especially if our friends know that, we have a responsibility to represent Christ well, to represent Christ to our friends well. Now, in Philippians chapter 3, verse 17, it says, "Join together in following my example, brothers and sisters, and just as you have us as a model, keep your eyes on those who live like we do." Now, this is Paul writing this. And Paul, as he said, the first verse, he says, "Join together in following my example." Paul was such a great leader, and he always brought people on the journey with him. He didn't just say, "Do this." He said, "No, watch me. I'm going to do it with you." He was a great example of a leader and how we should be following Christ. There are so many people in this room, for all you students, there's so many adults in this room who are a great example of what it looks like to follow Christ. Now, don't give them too much credit. They're still human. They are imperfect. But find a mentor. Find a friend who just looks like Christ and models that so well. And just to give you a view of what that looks like, for me, I have a friend, her name's Breland, and she's someone that I would consider my pace car. I like to match her speed of things. She is just the kindest person that I can think of. In the way that it impacts me the most is how she handles or how she interacts with people. At her job, she runs like the media and the production and the tech, like everything at her church in Oklahoma City. And people come in and ask her really dumb questions sometimes, really easy questions of like how to turn on a computer, which I'm not judging because I probably am that person that's asking how to turn on the computer, but she is so patient with them. She always smiles and says, "Yeah, I'll show you how to do it." And she walks over and she shows them, and I've never seen her act frustrated or upset or aggravated that they're asking her this question that should be a pretty simple thing that you could figure out on their own. But she's so patient with them. And something else that really sticks out to me is the way that she interacts with strangers. When we walk into a restaurant or when we're checking out at the grocery store, she always stops and smiles and asks the people how they're doing. And just her interaction with them has impacted me so much that I'm like, okay, I want to be like that. Actually, on my first day of work here, I walked in and I was like, okay, just be like Breland. Okay, just smile at people. If people say weird things to me that I don't understand, just laugh and smile and nod like everything's okay, and just go with the flow. And she's someone that I always look to, and I think, okay, how would she respond to this situation? And I think the ultimate person of how we should be modeling our life is Christ. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the bracelets WWJD. That might be just like a 90s thing. I don't really know. Maybe it's been around forever. Okay, a few of you have it. That's awesome. So that stands for what would Jesus do? And I think most of all, Jesus would be kind. Jesus would be loving. Y'all, it's cool to be kind. It's okay. Don't be embarrassed or ashamed. If your friends are picking on someone, don't be embarrassed to stand up for them and say, hey, that's not right. We should be kind. We should be loving to these people. I think Christ is the ultimate example of that. And don't be ashamed to stand up for the people who maybe are always getting picked on or always getting bullied. But another thing that people are always looking is if they know you're a Christian, they might be wondering, if you're a Christian, they might be wondering why you've never invited them to church. People actually will come to church if you invite them. There's statistics out there somewhere that say that if you invite your friends to church and you make a plan with them, say like, hey, I'm going to come pick you up at 6 o'clock. We can grab a bite to eat before, and you're going to come with me to Collective. People are more likely to come than if you just say, hey, meet me there. Because meeting someone there, how many of you guys like to just meet your friends there? Whether you're going to the movie, the mall, the store, no. How many of you like to meet them beforehand, maybe at their house, and ride together? Yes. Riding together, meeting beforehand is always better, especially if you're having to go to a new place. Something that comes off when Janae and Zach got married, Janae had to change a lot of her documents. She had to change her license, her social security number. We had to do something for her passport, I think. All these things. And she called me and she said, Kendall, I don't want to go alone. Will you come with me? And so we spent all day driving around Gainesville, just changing her name. We had to go to the bank. We had to go back and forth, all these things, because it was just more fun if we could do it together. So invite your friends to come with you, and the perfect time to invite them is next week for a bonfire. There's a little shameless plug right there. Yep, okay, 4 of you are excited. No, but really, bonfire is going to be awesome. As Zach said, it's an outdoor environment, so it's the perfect time to bring them if they've been maybe uncomfortable with some of COVID and that sort of thing. Next week is the perfect time to invite them and to bring your friends. So make sure you bring them next week because, like I said, if people know that we're Christians, but we're not ever inviting them to come along and to participate in the things that we do, they might start wondering, like, well, how come you don't want me to come there? Like, it doesn't hurt to ask, and it really doesn't hurt that bad to get rejected. It does the first time, but then after a while, you're like, oh, it's not that bad because it's not personal. They're not rejecting you. They're just rejecting the gospel, which is not good, but you just keep loving them and be patient with them. Then they'll hopefully and prayerfully, they'll end up coming with you one day. And there's one verse that I want to leave with you guys tonight before we go back into a response song. This is a verse that I read a few weeks ago in my devotion, and God has just stuck it in my heart, and I have not been able to shake it. It's Proverbs 11:25, and it says, a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. That's something that has stuck in my brain, stuck in my mind, because I want to be refreshing others. Not for my own selfish gain, but I want to be a joyful encounter for somebody else. You never know what just smiling at a person will do. You never know how that might just make their day when you're checking out at the grocery store or when you're driving through the drive-thru somewhere, just being kind and just smiling at a person. You never know what that encounter might do for them, how that might encourage them. Someone was telling me today that she was talking with the maintenance were supposed to come to her house today. They got the times mixed up, long story, and they just said, oh, I'm so sorry about that. Can we reschedule? And the lady on the phone said to this other woman, she said, I'm so sorry. And she said, oh, it's okay, it's fine. Like, it happens, we'll just schedule it for tomorrow. And the lady was so shocked by her grace, by her just saying, it's okay. She was like, oh my gosh, you're the nicest person I've ever talked to. And she was like, well, I mean, it was an accident. It's not like you did this on purpose. And so you never know what just smiling and being kind to someone will do and how that will just make their day and how refreshing that is for someone else. And then ultimately, in the end, it refreshes you in return. And that, I think, is the ultimate gift and just is so sweet when you're able to bless someone else's life, and then in return, it fills you up. So Clint's going to come up here in a second, but I'm going to pray for you guys. And so you guys can bow your head, God, we just thank you for tonight. I pray that through these different things, God, that as you're speaking to us, maybe we just need to stop comparing our pace to other people's. Maybe we've been getting caught up in how our friends are doing, and we've been focused on them and not on our own and not going at our own speed. And we need to slow down and just realize that we can go at our own pace and to not compare. God, maybe some people in this room are just not even sure what the pace is that you have for them. I pray that you would reveal that to them tonight, God, in the next few weeks, that people would just seek your word. They would seek your voice, God, that you would speak to them and just reveal the pace in which, and the plans that you have for them. And maybe tonight there's some people who we know that people are watching us. They know that there's people, their friends who are watching them. And tonight they want to make a decision just to be a better leader, a better friend. Maybe there's people in our hearts that we want to invite to Collective. I pray that you would place the boldness in us to invite our friends to come to church, invite them to come on this journey with us. God, I pray that you would just continue to speak to us as we have this time of response today. Jesus, we love you so much, and I pray all of this in your name. Amen.